I used to work the night shift at a convenience store on the edge of town, 11 at night until 7 in the morning, 5 nights a week. My life outside of work was pretty much non-existent. I would come home, sleep until the afternoon, wake up and waste hours scrolling through social media or playing games on my phone until it was time to go back. For months, maybe even a year, I just didn't care enough to do anything different. I was 23 years old and felt like I was going nowhere. Some nights, during those long stretches between customers, I would think to myself, man, just let something happen. Anything to break up the monotony. I imagined meeting someone interesting or having some kind of adventure that would shake things up. I never thought my wish would come true in the worst way possible. It was a Wednesday night, or technically Thursday morning, around 2. The store was dead. I mean completely empty. No cars in the lot, no one walking by outside, just me and the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead. I was leaning against the counter, half watching some video on my phone, when I heard the sound of an engine. I looked up and saw an old dark-colored van pulling into the parking lot. It drove past the front entrance and parked way over in the corner near the dumpster, far from the lights. The engine stayed running. I watched for a minute, waiting to see if anyone would get out, but nothing happened. The van just sat there idling with its headlights on. I figured maybe it was someone sleeping in their car or waiting to pick somebody up. It was strange, but not alarming. I went back to my phone, though I kept glancing up every now and then. 5 minutes passed, then 7. The van was still there, engine still running, no movement. I started to feel a little uneasy, but I told myself I was being paranoid. People do weird stuff at night all the time. Then the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out, wearing a dark hoodie pulled low over his face and a mask covering his nose and mouth. He did not walk toward the store right away. Instead, he walked around the van slowly, like he was inspecting it or looking for something. Then he opened the back doors and started rummaging around inside. I could not see what he was doing, but my gut told me something was off. I straightened up behind the counter, trying to look casual, but my heart was starting to beat faster. A moment later, a second person got out from the driver's seat. A woman, also wearing a hood and mask. She and the man talked for a few seconds, their heads closed together, and then both of them looked directly at the store. At me. My stomach dropped. The man closed the van doors and they started walking toward the entrance. I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe they just needed to buy something. Maybe I was overreacting. But my hands were already sweating as I positioned myself behind the register, trying to act normal while keeping my eyes on them. They pushed through the door and I greeted them with a shaky hello. Neither of them responded. The woman stayed near the front, pretending to browse the candy rack by the door, but I could tell she was not really looking at anything. She was watching me. The man walked straight toward the back of the store, disappearing behind the tall shelves where the camera angle did not quite reach. I tried to track his movements, but I lost sight of him. My pulse was pounding in my ears now. I glanced at the woman. It had not moved. She was just standing there, one hand in her jacket pocket. Then through the window I saw a third person step out of the van, a big guy, taller and broader than the other two. He did not come inside. He just leaned against the outside wall near the door, lit a cigarette, and stared into the store. That is when it clicked. This was not random. This was planned. One person inside near the back. One person by the door. One person outside blocking the exit. I was being set up. My mind raced. I thought about the alarm button under the counter. I thought about my phone in my pocket. But my hands were shaking, and I knew if I made the wrong move, things could go very bad very fast. I decided I had to lock the door. If I could keep the third guy outside, at least I would only have to deal with two of them. I started moving slowly toward the entrance, pretending I was going to wipe down the glass. I had just reached for the lock when the man in the back of the store called out loudly, "Hey, you got any Marlboros up there?" I froze. His voice was rough, impatient. I had no choice but to turn around and walk back to the counter. Yeah, we do," I said, my voice cracking a little. "Which kind?" By the time I got back behind the register, the woman had moved closer. She was standing right in front of the counter now, her hands still buried in her pocket. I could see the outline of something hard pressing against the fabric. My throat went dry. The man came around the corner from the back, his eyes locked on me. "How much for a pack?" he asked. I tried to answer, but my mouth was so dry I could barely get the words out. "$7.50, I managed. He nodded slowly, not breaking eye contact. I glanced toward the door. The third guy had finished his cigarette and was now walking toward the entrance. My chance to lock the door was gone. I was trapped. All three of them were closing in, forming a triangle around me. The woman's hand twitched inside her pocket. The man leaned on the counter, his face just a few feet from mine. "You look nervous," he said quietly. I did not know what to say. My hand drifted down toward the alarm button under the counter, but I was too scared to press it. What if they saw me? What if it made things worse? My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Then out of nowhere, headlights flooded the parking lot. Bright, almost blinding. I squinted through the window and saw a white security truck pulling up right in front of the store. The logo on the side read ProGuard Security. I had seen that truck before. The guard, a big older guy named Ron, did regular patrols of the shopping complex we were part of. I had never been so relieved to see anyone in my life. The three people in the store immediately changed their demeanor. The guy outside backed away from the door and pretended to look at the gas prices on the sign. The woman pulled her hand out of her pocket and grabbed a bottle of soda from the cooler. The man near me said loudly, "Oh yeah, thanks man," and picked up a pack of gum from the rack. Ron walked in, his heavy boots thudding on the tile floor. "Pretty quiet tonight, huh?" he said with a grin. I tried to smile back, but my face felt frozen. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely steady. "Real quiet." He walked over to the coffee station and poured himself a cup, then grabbed a pre-packaged sandwich from the cooler. I rang him up, but I kept talking to him, asking about his shift, how his night was going, anything to keep him in the store longer. The woman and the man bought their items quickly. They did not look at me again. They walked out, and the third guy followed. I watched through the window as all three of them got back into the van. The engine revved and they pulled out of the lot fast, tires squealing slightly as they turned onto the road. Once they were gone, I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. Ron looked at me. "You okay, kid? You look like you just saw a ghost." I told him everything. About the van, the three people, the way they surrounded me, the hand in the pocket. His expression turned serious. He pulled out his phone and called the police, giving them a description of the van and the direction it went. He stayed with me for another 15 minutes, making sure I was all right before he had to continue his patrol. "I'll swing by more often tonight," he promised. "You need anything, you call me." I thanked him, my voice shaking with relief. After he left, I stood behind the counter in silence, staring at the empty parking lot. My hands would not stop trembling. The rest of that shift dragged on forever. Every time a car pulled in, my heart rate spiked. I kept checking the security cameras, watching the door, clutching my phone like a lifeline. By the time 7 rolled around and my replacement showed up, I felt like I had aged 10 years. The nights after that were even worse. I could not focus on anything. Every shadow outside made me jump. Every customer that walked in made my stomach twist. I started keeping my phone in my hand at all times, the emergency number already pulled up. Around 3 in the morning was the worst. That was when they had shown up and my body seemed to remember it. I would feel the same tightness in my chest, the same cold sweat. I barely slept during the day anymore. I would lie in bed replaying the whole thing over and over, wondering what would have happened if Ron had not shown up. After 2 weeks of this, I could not take it anymore. I went to my manager and told him I needed to switch shifts. I did not want to quit because I needed the money, but I could not keep doing overnights. He understood. He moved me to the evening shift, 3 in the afternoon until 11 at night. It was not perfect, but it was safer. There were more people around. More cars in the lot, more light. Looking back now, I realize how lucky I was. If that security guard had not been making his rounds at that exact moment, I do not know what would have happened. Maybe they would have just robbed the register. Maybe it would have been worse. I try not to think about it too much, but it changed me. I am more aware now of my surroundings, of the people who come in, of the exits and the cameras. I do not take safety for granted anymore. I also stopped wishing for something exciting to happen. I used to think my life was boring, that I needed some kind of adventure to make it worthwhile. But that night taught me something important. Sometimes boring is good. Sometimes quiet and uneventful is exactly what you need. I started taking a community college course in the evenings before work, learning some new skills, thinking about what I actually want to do with my life. I talk to my coworkers more now, instead of just keeping to myself. I even started going to the gym a couple times a week. Small changes, but they matter. I still think about that night sometimes. I wonder if those 3 people ever got caught if they tried the same thing somewhere else. I hope they did not hurt anyone. And I am grateful more than I can say that I am still here to tell this story. My life might still be ordinary, but at least it is mine. And honestly, after what I went through, I will take ordinary any day. Working night shift security at an industrial park on the outskirts of town is not what I imagined myself doing right out of high school. But I needed money, and this job paid better than most entry-level positions. Everyone told me not to take it. My friends said the graveyard shift would mess me up, that I'd never sleep right again. They were not wrong. The shift ran from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, and I was responsible for patrolling 6 warehouse buildings, completely alone. The unnatural sleep schedule alone was exhausting. Some nights I'd be bored out of my mind, fighting to stay awake. Other nights I'd deal with homeless people trying to break in, raccoons making weird noises that sounded almost human, or shadows that played tricks on my tired eyes. But there was one night during my first week that I think about all the time. That was the night I understood something was seriously wrong with warehouse number 4. It happened around 2:30 in the morning. I was making my rounds in the electric golf cart the company provided, moving slowly between the buildings. Warehouse 4 was the oldest one on the property. It had been shut down about 3 months before I started, sitting empty except for some old cardboard boxes and broken pallets. As I drove past, I glanced up at the second-floor windows like I always did. That's when I saw it, a flickering light coming from one of the windows. It was a pale blue color, not like a flashlight, but moving around like someone was carrying one. I stopped the cart and stared. The light moved from one window to another, then disappeared. I grabbed my walkie-talkie and called Sarah, my supervisor. She was a woman in her mid-30s who worked out of the main office building and had been doing this job for years. "Sarah, you there?" I said into the radio. "Yeah, what's up?" Her voice crackled back. "I'm at Warehouse 4. I'm seeing a light on the second floor, blue-colored, moving around." There was a pause. "That's impossible. All the warehouses have their power shut off. There shouldn't be any lights anywhere." "I know what I saw," I told her. "All right, go check it out. But be careful and keep your radio on." I parked the golf cart and grabbed my flashlight and the key master, a heavy ring with keys to every building on the property. My hands were shaking a little as I approached the main entrance. I had only been inside Warehouse 4 once before during my training on the first day. It was just an empty concrete box. Nothing special, nothing scary. But now, walking up to that door in the middle of the night, it felt different. I unlocked the door and it creaked open, the sound echoing in the silence. Inside, it was pitch black. I clicked on my flashlight and swept it around. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the empty concrete floor, a few wooden pallets stacked in the corner, and torn cardboard boxes scattered around. The air smelled musty and thick with dust. I called out, "Security, anyone in here?" My voice bounced off the walls and faded into nothing. No response. I looked up toward the second-floor windows. No blue light, nothing, just darkness. I walked further inside, my footsteps echoing with each step. The metal staircase that led to the second floor was in the far corner. I made my way toward it, the beam of my flashlight bouncing with each step. When I reached the stairs, I looked up. The second floor was just an open space with a small office at the far end. I started climbing. Each step on the metal staircase made a hollow, ringing sound that seemed way too loud. When I reached the top, I stopped and looked around. The space was empty, just like downstairs. But then I saw it. Under the door of the small office at the end, there was a thin line of pale blue light. My heart started beating faster. I walked toward the office, my flashlight pointed ahead. When I reached the door, I stopped and knocked. "Security, I'm coming in." I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The office was empty, just an old desk, a broken chair, and a metal filing cabinet. But the blue light was gone. I stood there, confused, sweeping my flashlight around the small room. That's when I noticed the air vent on the ceiling. I walked directly underneath it and looked up. There was a faint glow coming from inside the ductwork. I thought maybe it was some kind of electrical issue. I reached for my walkie-talkie to tell Sarah, but before I could press the button, the light went out completely. I stood there in the darkness, only my flashlight providing any illumination. Then I heard it, a scraping sound. Something was moving inside the air vent. It sounded like metal scraping against metal, slow and deliberate. At first, I thought maybe a raccoon or a possum had gotten stuck in there, but the sound was too heavy, too slow. I pulled the broken chair over and climbed up on it to get closer to the vent. Standing on the chair, I was now just a couple feet below the vent opening. I aimed my flashlight directly at it, trying to see inside through the slats. The beam wasn't strong enough to penetrate very far. The scraping sound stopped. Then I heard something else. Breathing. Raspy, uneven breathing. Not an animal. A person. My hands started shaking. I kept the flashlight pointed at the vent, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The breathing continued, getting slightly louder. I tried to see deeper into the duct, angling my light. Then, without warning, something moved in the darkness. A shadow shifted inside the vent. And then it turned toward me. A face appeared right up against the vent slats, just inches from mine. I nearly fell off the chair. The face was covered in dust and grime. Hair hung down in dirty, tangled clumps, but it was the eyes that froze me. They were wide open, staring directly at me, unblinking. Wild. The person did not say anything. They just stared at me for what felt like forever but was probably only 3 or 4 seconds. Then slowly the face pulled back into the darkness of the duct. The scraping sound started again, faster this time, moving away. I could hear whatever it was crawling through the vent system, the sound traveling away from the office. I jumped off the chair and ran out of the room. My only thought was to get out of that building. I sprinted toward the metal staircase, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. But when I got to the top of the stairs, I stopped dead. Down at the bottom, standing perfectly still in the darkness, was a figure, tall and thin, just standing there like a statue. I aimed my flashlight down at it. The moment the light hit the figure, it moved. Fast. It ran toward the front door. I bolted down the stairs, my boots clanging on the metal steps. When I reached the bottom, I looked toward the entrance. The door was still open, just like I had left it. I ran outside into the cool night air and jumped into the golf cart. I looked back at the warehouse. It was completely dark, no lights anywhere. I grabbed my walkie-talkie, my hand still shaking. Sarah, come in." "I'm here, what's wrong?" she replied, her voice tense. I told her everything. The blue light, the sounds in the vent, the face, the figure at the bottom of the stairs. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Stay outside. I'm calling the police right now. Do not go back in there." I sat in that golf cart, staring at Warehouse 4, waiting. About 15 minutes later, 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing. Sarah arrived right behind them in her truck. The officers got out and I walked them through what had happened. One of them, an older guy with gray hair, asked me to describe exactly what I saw. I told him about the face in the vent, the breathing, the figure. He nodded and said they would check it out. Sarah stayed with me while the 2 officers went inside with their flashlights and radios. We waited. I kept expecting to hear shouting or some kind of commotion, but there was nothing. After about 30 minutes, the officers came back out. "We checked the entire building," the older officer said. "Both floors, the office, even looked inside the vents as best we could. There's nobody in there." "What about the air ducts?" I asked. "We checked. No signs anyone's been crawling around in there recently. No footprints in the dust, nothing disturbed. We also checked all the entrances and exits. No signs of forced entry." The younger officer looked at me and said, "You've been working nights long." "It's my first week," I said. He nodded slowly. "Night shift can mess with your head, fatigue, stress. Sometimes people see things that aren't really there." I felt my face get hot. "I know what I saw." Sarah looked at me. "Are you absolutely sure about what you saw?" "Yes, 100%. But there was no evidence, no person, no proof. The officers took down my information and said they'd file a report, but I could tell they thought I was just a tired kid seeing things. After they left, Sarah put her hand on my shoulder. "Maybe you should take the rest of the night off. Go home, get some sleep." I agreed. I did not want to be there anymore. I drove home as the sun was starting to come up, my mind racing. What did I see? Who was that person? How did they get in the vents? Where did they go? That was 6 months ago. I still work night shift security at the industrial park. The pay is too good to quit, but I refuse to go into Warehouse 4 alone anymore. Whenever I have to check it, I wait until Sarah or one of the other guards can come with me. I have never seen that blue light again. I have never heard those sounds, but I still think about that face in the vent, those wild eyes staring at me through the slats. I think about the figure at the bottom of the stairs. I have tried to convince myself it was just exhaustion, my mind playing tricks, but deep down I know what I saw was real. What scares me the most is not knowing who that person was or how they got into the ductwork. It is wondering where they went, because the police found no trace of anyone. No way in, no way out. And the thing that keeps me up sometimes, even now, is the look in those eyes. It was not surprise or fear at being discovered. It was something else. It was like they had been waiting for someone to find them. I am just glad I got out of that building when I did, because I genuinely do not know what would have happened if I had stayed. I took the night shift job as a security guard because I needed the money. Student loans were piling up, and this gig paid better than anything else I could find. The building was an old office tower downtown, 15 years past its prime, with more vacant offices than occupied ones. My name is Jake, I'm 24, and I'd been doing this for about 3 months. Usually it was easy. Walk the floors, check the doors, make sure nobody broke in. But that night everything changed. It was a Thursday when I got the call from Marcus, my coworker who usually took Thursdays. He sounded terrible, his voice shaking like he'd just run a marathon. "Jake, I need you to cover my shift tonight. I'm sick." Before I could ask what was wrong, he added something that stuck with me. "Be careful on the 5th floor tonight." Then he hung up. Marcus had worked this building for 5 years. He never called in sick. Never. I tried calling him back, but he didn't answer. I figured he must be really out of it, maybe the flu or something worse. I didn't think much about his warning. The 5th floor was mostly empty anyway, just some law firm that had closed down 3 months ago after some big lawsuit. I got to the building at 10:45, checked in at the security desk in the lobby, and looked over my checklist. 8 floors to patrol every 2 hours. The building was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the buzz of the emergency lights in the stairwells. At 11:45, I started my first round. I took the elevator up floor by floor. The first 4 floors were normal. I checked that the doors were locked, turned off lights that had been left on, made sure the windows were secure. Nothing unusual. But when I stepped onto the 5th floor, something felt different. The air was colder, even though the thermostat showed the same temperature as every other floor. The hallway stretched out in front of me, fluorescent lights flickering slightly overhead. The Morrison and Associates office was at the far end, behind a frosted glass door. I could smell old paper and something else, something stale. As I walked down the hallway, I heard it. A sound like an office chair rolling across a floor, the wheels squeaking slightly. It came from inside the Morrison office. I stopped and listened. Silence. I walked to the door and tried the handle, locked tight. I pressed my ear against the glass. Nothing. I told myself it was probably just the pipes. Old buildings make weird noises, maybe a rat or something. I continued up to floors 6, 7, and 8. Everything was fine up there. I went back down to the lobby and sat at my desk, trying to shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. At 1:30 in the morning, I was halfway through a cup of coffee when the alarm system went off. A sharp beeping sound echoed through the lobby. I checked the computer screen. Motion detected, floor 5, hallway C, 1:27 a.m. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, then headed back up. My heart was beating a little faster now. When I got to the 5th floor, I went straight to hallway C. It was empty. Completely empty. I walked slowly, shining my flashlight into every corner. The Morrison and Associates door was still locked. I checked every other office on that hallway, all locked. No sign of anyone. I pulled out my phone and tried calling Marcus again. No answer. I went to the security camera monitor on the wall, but that hallway had a blind spot. Of course it did. I turned off the alarm and wrote it down in the logbook. Probably a false alarm. The sensors were old. As I turned to leave, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A flash of light just for a second moving across the frosted glass of the Morrison office door. I spun around. Nothing, just darkness behind that glass. I stared at it for a long moment, then convinced myself I was seeing things. I was tired. That was all. At 3 in the morning, I was back at the security desk trying to stay awake when my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Check the 5th floor again. I stared at the screen. Who was this? I thought maybe Marcus was texting me from a different phone. I typed back, "Who is this?" No response. 10 minutes passed. Then the desk phone rang. The old landline that hardly ever got used. I looked at the caller ID screen. It said, "Calling from extension 512, floor 5. My stomach dropped. I picked up the phone. Hello? Static, just crackling static. Then faintly underneath the noise, I heard something, a woman's voice, barely a whisper. "He's still here." The line went dead. I sat there staring at the phone. Extension 512 belonged to the Morrison and Associates office. I checked the list to be sure. There was nobody in this building except me. Nobody. The phone shouldn't even be working in that office. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? I got a weird phone call. They'd think I was wasting their time. I had to go back up there. I had to know. I took the elevator to the 5th floor for the 3rd time that night. This time I was going to check every single office. I started with the smaller ones along hallway C, the ones before the Morrison office. The first 2 were locked and empty, just desks covered in dust. The 3rd office, I was sure I had checked it earlier and it was locked. But now the door was open, just a crack. I pushed it wider and flipped on the light switch. The room was empty. A desk, a chair, filing cabinets, all covered in a thin layer of dust. But on the desk there was a piece of paper, a note, white paper, black ink, written by hand. It said, "Don't go to 512. The handwriting was clear and steady. The paper was clean, no dust on it. Someone had been here, recently. Someone was in this building with me and they were trying to warn me. But why not just come talk to me? Why hide?" I thought maybe it was a homeless person who had broken in, trying to scare me off so they could stay. I walked back into the hallway and headed straight for the Morrison and Associates office. I pulled out my master key. My hands were shaking slightly as I unlocked the door. I pushed the door open and reached for the light switch. The fluorescent lights buzzed to life, revealing a reception area thick with dust. There was a leather couch with cracks in it, a coffee table with old magazines from 2023, and a reception desk with a computer monitor dark and dead. The smell of mold hit me immediately. I walked past the reception area into a narrow hallway. There were 3 doors along it with numbers on them. 510, 511, 512. The first 2 doors were open. I looked inside. Empty offices, desks, and chairs covered in sheets. But the door to 512 was closed. I walked toward it slowly, my flashlight in one hand. As I got closer, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Breathing. Heavy. Steady breathing coming from inside that room. I stopped a few feet from the door. I listened carefully. Yes, it was definitely the sound of someone breathing. My hand reached for the doorknob. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I turned the knob slowly and pushed the door open. The room was dark. I shined my flashlight inside. It was a small office with a desk, a filing cabinet, and a bookshelf. And standing behind the door was a man. My light hit his face. He was pale, his eyes wide open, staring directly at me without blinking. He wore an old black suit that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in months. I stumbled backward. "Sir, are you okay?" I said, my voice cracking. He didn't answer. He just stood there staring. The man started walking toward me, slowly at first, then faster. His arms were stretched out in front of him, reaching. "Who are you? You can't be here," I said, backing into the hallway. He didn't respond. He didn't blink. He just kept coming. I turned and ran toward the reception area. I could hear his footsteps behind me faster than I expected. When I reached the main door of the office, I grabbed the handle and pulled. It didn't open. The automatic lock had engaged. I needed a key card from the inside to get out. I spun around. The man was almost on me, just a few feet away now. I remembered the emergency exit. There was a fire escape stairwell at the end of the hallway to my right. I bolted for it. My hand slammed against the exit door and the fire alarm started blaring. I didn't care. I flew down the stairs, taking them two at a time, not daring to look back. I heard his footsteps echoing in the stairwell behind me, relentless and rhythmic. I kept running until I hit the ground floor exit and burst out onto the sidewalk. The cold night air hit my face. I stood there on the empty street, gasping for breath, staring back at the building. It was 3:45 in the morning. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. My hands were still shaking. "I need police at the Riverside office tower on 5th Street. There's someone in the building. I'm the night security guard. He chased me out." The operator told me to stay outside and that officers were on their way. 15 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up. I explained everything: the phone call, the note, the man in room 512. They went inside to check. I waited on the sidewalk, watching the building. 30 minutes passed before they came back down. "We checked the 5th floor, one officer said. "The Morrison and Associates office is empty. No one's in there. We checked room 512, just a desk and some chairs. No one." I insisted I had seen him, that he chased me. The officer nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "Could have been someone who ran off before we got up there. We'll check the rest of the building." They did a full sweep. Nothing. They checked the security cameras. The system had malfunctioned. No footage recorded after 1 in the morning. They wrote up a report and suggested the building owner hire more security. By 6 in the morning, the police were gone and my shift was over. I drove home and immediately called Marcus. This time he answered. His voice was exhausted. "Jake, what happened?" I told him everything. There was a long silence. Then he said, "I saw him too, Jake, 3 nights ago. That's why I called in sick. I couldn't go back." My throat went dry. "What do you mean you saw him?" Marcus sighed. "I was doing my rounds. I got to the 5th floor and he was just standing there in the stairwell, staring at me. I ran. I reported it to the building manager, but nobody believed me. I asked him who the man was. Marcus said he didn't know, but he looked into the history of the building. A lawyer named David Morrison, the founder of the firm, had died in his office 2 years ago. Suicide. In room 512. I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't believe in ghosts, but I couldn't explain what I had seen. Marcus told me he was quitting. He couldn't handle it anymore. I told him I was done too. I called the building manager that morning and quit on the spot. A week later, I heard the Riverside office tower was going to be demolished. Something about safety code violations and structural issues. I never found out what really happened that night. I don't know if that man was real, if he was some squatter who knew how to hide, or if there was something else going on. But I learned one thing. When your gut tells you something is wrong, when every instinct in your body is screaming at you to leave, you listen. I got out of that building and I'm grateful I did. I still think about the note sometimes. "Don't go to 512. Someone tried to warn me. Maybe it was Marcus from a previous night. Maybe it was someone else who had encountered that man and escaped. I'll never know. But I'm alive, and that's what matters."